It seems almost surreal to think back to those fateful days in late summer. 1997. But there are moments in history that are so deeply etched into the collective memory that they will never fade. Charles Spencer. Princess Diana's younger brother later described a chilling experience. Just one day after writing the famous eulogy that would later shake the foundations of the British monarchy, he stood alone before his sister's coffin. He looked at her, this woman who had been an icon, a saint, or a media darling to the entire world, and all he could think was, wow, this girl is simply stunning. It was a moment of pure, painful humanity amidst global chaos. For years, the story of Diana's tragic death was told almost exclusively from the perspective of the royal family, the hounded tabloids, or the shocked public. But now, truths are coming to light straight from the inner circle of the Spencer family, details never meant for public consumption, and they call into question everything we thought we knew about Prince William and Prince Harry's darkest hours. The agonizing question arises, why was the funeral procession such unimaginable torment for Diana's sons, and what really transpired behind the closed, heavy doors of the palace when news of the princess's death arrived? On September 6, 1997, the world literally held its breath. The streets of London were lined with millions of people, frozen in a collective trance of grief and disbelief, while more than 2.5 billion people worldwide watched on television. It was an event of global proportions, a day that would go down as one of the saddest in British history. Yet amidst the sea of flowers and the deafening silence of the crowd, there was one image more powerful than words: two young boys, Prince William and Prince Harry, walking with bowed heads behind their mother's coffin. William was just 15 years old, Harry only 12. The sight was heartbreaking. They marched with stoic, pale faces as people around them burst into tears. On their narrow shoulders rested not only the unbearable grief of losing their mother, but also the crushing weight of duty, tradition, and the expectations of an entire nation. Every step they took on the hard asphalt of London seemed to last an eternity. It was an image that would forever define their childhood and haunt Harry's dreams for decades to come. What the world didn't know at the time, however, was that this march had never been the children's choice. It was a decision their uncle Charles Spencer had fought against with all his might. Charles Spencer was not just Diana's brother. He was the person who had grown up with her, who knew her fears, and who understood the pain she had suffered within the rigid walls of the royal family. When the funeral committee informed him that William and Harry were to walk in the funeral procession, his reaction was immediate and unequivocal. He said, "Never." In heated discussions with Buckingham Palace courtiers, he desperately tried to explain that it was cruel and unnatural to put two children on display in their deepest grief before the eyes of the world. He argued that Diana would never have wanted this, that she had always protected her sons from precisely this kind of media exploitation. But his protests met with a wall of aristocratic coldness. The palace's response was as direct as it was callous. The decision had already been made. Spencer, however, did not give up so easily. He argued, he demanded, he appealed to the humanity of those in charge. He pointed out that cameras would capture every tiny reaction on the children's faces, every moment of their breakdown, every tear. It was all to no avail. Then came what Spencer later described as one of the worst breaches of trust. He was told a lie. They claimed to Spencer that William and Harry themselves had expressed a wish to participate. At that moment, everything changed for him. If it was their own decision, he didn't want to interfere. He didn't want to force them, but he also didn't want to stand in their way if they wanted to pay their respects to their mother in this manner. So with a heavy heart, he let the matter rest. Heavy heart, c'est bon. The bitter truth only came to light many years later, when Prince Harry revealed in his memoirs and interviews that they had never had a choice. They had simply been ordered what to do. As a 12-year-old boy, Harry had no power to defy the institution's commands. He followed instructions, unaware that his uncle had fought for him. Spencer realized far too late that he had been manipulated, that he had been used to pave the way for a charade he would never have allowed under normal circumstances. The morning of the funeral was tinged with a leaden heaviness. The air in London felt thick, heavy with grief shock and a sense of injustice. When the group finally appeared, Charles Spencer alongside Prince Charles, Prince Philip and the two boys, the cameras of the world's press zoomed relentlessly in on the children's faces. The world saw bravery and dignity, but Spencer saw only two traumatized children burdened with a weight no one that age should have to bear. The walk from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey was long and agonizing. Harry later described the feeling as a kind of numbness, as if his emotions had completely shut down in order to survive the pain. Everything seemed to him like a film playing out on someone else. For Charles Spencer, the pain of that day was not only the loss of his beloved sister, but also the feeling of having lost a battle fought to protect his nephews. But what he did next would leave the world speechless. In Westminster Abbey, he stepped up to the microphone to deliver his eulogy. It was no ordinary tribute. It was one of the bravest and most direct speeches ever given at a royal funeral. He didn't just talk about Diana, he became her voice. He called her the most hunted person of the modern age, directly attacking not only the media, but also the institutions that had failed to protect her. As the Queen and Prince Charles sat motionless in their pews, Spencer's words sliced through the solemn silence like knives. He made a promise that could be interpreted as an open declaration of war against the House of Windsor. He pledged that Diana's blood family, the Spencers, would always watch over William and Harry. He emphasized that they would ensure the boys were raised not only in the traditions of the crown, but also with the warmth and spirit that Diana had embodied. When he finished, something extraordinary happened outside the abbey. People began to clap, and the applause surged like a wave into the church. It was a moment of triumph for truth, a sign that the people had understood exactly what Spencer was saying. Diana had been wronged, and finally, someone had spoken out. Despite the power of his words, Spencer later had to admit that it was almost impossible to fully deliver on that promise. William and Harry were already too deeply entrenched in the monarchy's system. The crown controlled their future, their daily routines, and their security. There was no way to free them from that gilded cage or raise them the way Diana might have wished. Yet the seeds had been sown. Years later, Harry spoke openly about how deeply that funeral had traumatized him. He made it clear that in this day and age, grieving children would never be allowed to be paraded around in that way. The world had changed largely due to Diana's influence, but for the two princes, that change came too late. Charles Spencer never altered his opinion of the events of 1997. For him, the funeral procession remains one of the most painful moments of his life, a symbol of an institution's failure to care for the individual. And while the world witnessed the public mourning, what had transpired behind the scenes in the preceding days was characterized by chaos, silence, and a chilling coldness. To understand how things got to this point, we have to go back to the early morning hours of August 31, 1997. In a tunnel in Paris, a black Mercedes crashed into a pillar at high speed. Diana was inside, pursued by paparazzi who knew no bounds. The news spread like wildfire, first as vague rumors, then as the terrible certainty the most famous woman in the world was dead. In South Africa, Charles Spencer was awakened by a phone call he would never forget. The voice on the other end was calm, but the news was devastating. Diana had been in an accident. Shortly afterward came the second phone call confirming her death. Spencer knew immediately whom to blame. The photographers who had hounded her like prey for years were in his eyes the culprits. But while the world wept and crowds flooded palaces with flowers, an eerie silence remained within the royal family. The Queen and the rest of the family were at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. For hours, for days, there was no public reaction. No flag was lowered to half-mast, no speech was given. To the public, this silence seemed not like shock, but like indifference. Public anger began to boil over. Newspapers ran headlines like "Betrayal" and asked, "Where is our Queen?" In the midst of this national crisis, two boys were confined to Balmoral, isolated from the outside world. Prince Charles had to explain to his sons that their mother would never return. 12-year-old Harry kept asking the same question: is she really gone? For the first few days, they were denied all access to news. The intention was to protect them, but in reality, this meant they couldn't grasp the collective grief of the world. Harry later described the strange silence in the palace, where no one spoke of Diana, where no tears were shed, and where emotions were suppressed. It was a world that stood in stark contrast to the warmth Diana had always given them. Eventually, the pressure on the Queen became so great that she had to return to London and address the nation. Her speech on September 5th was an attempt at damage control. She praised Diana as an exceptional human being and a loving mother. But for many, this gesture came too late. The deep rift between the monarchy and the people had already become apparent. Diana had left a void that the system could not fill. Her death exposed the coldness of an institution that placed rules above people. Diana's story didn't end in that tunnel in Paris or in Althorpe Cemetery. It lived on in her sons, especially Harry, who over the years has become more and more of a mirror image of his mother. He inherited her rebellious spirit, her warmth, and her deep skepticism toward the royal machine. Every time he looks into a camera or sees the flashing lights of photographers, he is thrown back to that night in 1997. When he saw his wife Meghan facing the same mechanisms, the negative headlines, the attacks from within the palace, and the lack of protection, he decided to take a radical step. He refused to stand by and watch history repeat itself. In 2020, he broke with tradition, left the royal family, and moved to the United States. It was the bravest decision ever made by a member of the Windsor family in modern history. It wasn't an act of rebellion against his grandmother, but an act of survival. He did what Diana might have done had she had the chance. Charles Spencer, the man who had criticized the institution for years, quietly supported this move. He understood better than anyone why Harry had to escape. The shadows of the past were too long, the wounds too deep. Diana was gone, but her fight for humanity and freedom was completed by her youngest son. The events surrounding her death and funeral remain a stark reminder of what happens when a family places the burden of a crown above the love for its members. It is a story of loss, but also of belated justice, only fully realized with Harry's escape. The world will never forget Diana, not just for her beauty or her philanthropy, but for the truth that her brother Charles Spencer and later her son Harry brought to light, a truth about the dark corners of a palace that tried to extinguish the light of a woman who simply wanted to be loved. One must vividly imagine the atmosphere of those days to grasp the magnitude of Charles Spencer's actions. He was a man born into a world of etiquette and silence, yet in the face of his sister's death, he broke all those unwritten rules. His rage wasn't directed solely at the paparazzi, but at an entire system that had treated Diana like an outsider, despite her being the heart of the monarchy. In numerous interviews after the funeral, Spencer repeatedly emphasized that Diana had never truly been accepted. She had been a 19-year-old girl when she entered this world full of life and hope, and she was systematically broken. She was expected to smile, follow the rules, and ignore her pain. When her marriage to Prince Charles broke down, she was pushed even further away. Spencer was furious that she was stripped of her title of Royal Highness, a move that deprived her of official protection and left her to the wolves of the press. He made it clear that the palace knew perfectly well how hounded she was, yet did nothing to ensure her safety. This negligence in his eyes was murderous. Particularly noteworthy is Spencer's revelation of just how desperate Diana truly was in her final years. She would often call him weeping on the phone and telling him of her unbearable loneliness. She felt cornered, watched, and misunderstood. While the world saw her as a radiant princess, her brother saw a woman fighting for her psychological survival. These personal insights add a whole new layer of bitterness to the tragedy. It wasn't just a car accident. It was the culmination of a long chain of neglect and psychological trauma. That Spencer had the courage to address this at the funeral in front of the entire royal family is an achievement that cannot be praised highly enough. He risked his own social standing to defend his sister's honor. He told the Windsors to their faces that Diana didn't need royal titles to wield her magic. He hit the nail on the head. Diana's power came from the people, not the crown. And that was precisely what the royal family had feared so much about her. Her influence was uncontrollable because it was based on genuine emotion, something that had no place in the world of protocol. Even decades later, the question remains whether Charles Spencer could have done more. He himself seems to have often asked himself this question. But overcoming the immense machinery of Buckingham Palace was an almost insurmountable task even for an earl. The manipulations surrounding the boy's funeral procession demonstrate how ruthlessly the system operated to maintain the desired image of stability and continuity. They wanted the world to see that the monarchy endured, whatever the cost, even if the price was the mental health of two traumatized children. Harry's later decision to leave it all behind is the belated reckoning for these past mistakes. It is an irony of history that the very child who suffered most under the rigid rules ultimately found the strength to break them. Spencer laid the foundation for this resistance with his eulogy. He showed that one can speak the truth even when standing alone against a centuries-old empire. The connection between Diana's suffering, Spencer's courage, and Harry's escape forms a thread of rebellion that runs through the modern history of the Windsors. It is a tale of pain and liberation that teaches us that tradition must never serve as an excuse for inhumanity. The world now looks differently at the British monarchy, and this is largely thanks to the man who stood at his sister's coffin and vowed that her death would not be in vain. Princess Diana's story remains a reminder that behind the opulent walls and glittering crowns live real people whose hearts can break just as easily as anyone else's. And as long as people like Charles Spencer are willing to speak out, the secrets and shadows of power will never remain entirely hidden. It is an ongoing process of coming to terms with the past, demonstrating that truth has its own time and always finds a way to surface, no matter how deeply attempts are made to bury it under protocols and traditions. Diana may no longer be physically present, but her spirit of defiance lives on in every word spoken by her brother and in every courageous step taken by her son. The Spencer legacy is not one of titles, but one of truthfulness in a world that often prefers to look away. And so, the story of the Princess of Wales remains one of the most moving narratives of our time, a story that constantly reminds us of the importance of preserving our humanity no matter the cost. In quiet moments of reflection, it becomes clear that the events of 1997 marked not only the end of a life, but the beginning of a new era, one in which the facade of infallibility began to crack, cracks that could never be fully repaired. It was a wake-up call for an entire nation and a warning to all who believe that power trumps compassion.